The rain began just before sunset, the kind that made the streets of Seattle shine like glass. Daniel stood near the window of a quiet cafe on Maple Street, watching the water slide down the glass in thin lines. The city outside moved slowly, cars passing, people hurrying under umbrellas, lights turning on one by one. It felt like a normal evening, but Daniel's heart would not slow down. Tonight mattered more than he wanted to admit. Behind him, Emily sat at a small wooden table with 2 cups of coffee. She had already finished one and was now stirring the other without drinking it. The spoon touched the cup again and again, making a soft sound. She kept looking toward the door every few seconds. Daniel turned from the window and sat across from her. "You're nervous," he said gently. Emily smiled a little, but it did not hide her worry. "A little." Daniel leaned back in the chair. "She said she would come." Emily nodded, though her fingers tightened around the cup. "I know. It's been a long time. 3 years, 3 long years since they had last seen Olivia." Life had been very different back then. They were all younger, all living in Chicago, all believing the world was waiting for them. They had shared late dinners, cheap apartments, and dreams that felt too big to stay inside a small city life. Back then, the 3 of them had spent almost every day together. But things changed. Careers pulled people away. Relationships became complicated. Plans that once seemed perfect slowly fell apart. Daniel still remembered the last night they had all been together. It had been a quiet evening on a rooftop in Chicago, the 3 of them sitting on old chairs, talking about where life might take them. None of them imagined that within months they would go in completely different directions. Daniel and Emily eventually married and tried to build the life they thought they wanted. Olivia moved to Seattle for work. For a while, they stayed in touch through messages and calls. Then the calls became less frequent and the messages shorter, until finally there was silence. But some connections never truly disappear. 6 months ago, Daniel and Emily made a decision that surprised everyone they knew. They left their jobs, they sold most of their belongings, and they began traveling. It started as a simple road trip. They wanted space from their old routine, space to think about what they really wanted in life. But as the months passed, something strange happened. The more places they visited, the more they realized something was missing. Not a place, a person. The idea came slowly at first. Emily mentioned it during a quiet evening in a small town in California. "Do you ever think about Olivia?" she asked. Daniel had been staring at the ocean at the time. "Sometimes." Emily watched the waves for a long moment before speaking again. "I think we left something unfinished." Daniel understood what she meant, even though neither of them said the words out loud. Their connection with Olivia had always been special. It was more than friendship, but not something simple either. It was a balance they never truly explored. Maybe because they were too young. Maybe because they were afraid. But on the road, with the world feeling wide and open again, those old feelings slowly returned. Eventually, Emily said something Daniel had secretly been thinking for weeks. If we found her, so they did. After a few messages and a long phone call filled with laughter and surprise, they arranged to meet in Seattle. And now here they were, waiting. Emily looked at the cafe door again. "Maybe traffic is bad," she said. Daniel smiled. "Or maybe she's standing outside deciding if we've lost our minds." Emily laughed softly. "That's possible." Just then, the small bell above the cafe door rang. Both of them looked up at the same time. A woman stepped inside, brushing rain from her coat. Her hair was darker than Daniel remembered, falling just past her shoulders. She paused near the entrance and looked around the room. Then her eyes found them. For a moment, she didn't move. Neither did they. 3 years disappeared in a single second. Daniel, Emily. Her voice carried warmth and surprise. Emily stood immediately and walked toward her. The hug they shared felt natural, like no time had passed at all. "I missed you," Emily said quietly. Olivia stepped back and smiled. I missed you too. Daniel joined them and Olivia hugged him as well. You look older, she teased. Daniel laughed. That's rude. She shrugged playfully. Just honest. They sat together at the table, and for the next half hour, the conversation flowed easily. They talked about old memories, the strange jobs they once had, the terrible apartment kitchen where Daniel once burned a full Thanksgiving dinner. Olivia laughed until tears formed in her eyes. I can't believe you tried to cook a turkey. With no instructions. Daniel pointed at Emily. She said it looked easy. Emily raised her hands. I never said that. The cafe filled with warm noise around them, but their table felt like its own small world. Eventually, Olivia leaned back and studied them. You two look happy, she said. Daniel and Emily exchanged a glance. We are, Emily said. But Olivia asked. Daniel smiled slightly. You always notice the but? Olivia crossed her arms. 'Cause there's always a but. Emily sighed gently. Well, life changed a lot. Olivia nodded slowly. I heard you left Chicago. Daniel nodded. Yeah. And your job's gone. Olivia raised an eyebrow. So what exactly are you doing now? Emily answered. Traveling. Olivia blinked. Traveling where? Daniel shrugged. Everywhere. Emily explained how they had spent months driving across the country. California beaches, quiet towns in Colorado, forests in Oregon. They had met strangers, tried new things, and learned to live without strict plans. Olivia listened carefully. That sounds amazing, she said. It is, Daniel replied. But Olivia asked again. Emily smiled at how well Olivia still understood them, but something always felt incomplete. Olivia frowned slightly. Incomplete how? Emily looked down at her coffee for a moment. Then she spoke the truth she had been holding back all evening. We kept thinking about you. Olivia looked surprised me. Daniel nodded. Those years with you were some of the best years of our lives. Olivia didn't answer right away. She stared at the table, clearly unsure how to react. People grow up, she said quietly. Things change. Emily reached across the table and gently touched Olivia's hand. Maybe they shouldn't have. Olivia looked up. What do you mean? Daniel leaned forward. We realized something on the road. Olivia waited. That life feels bigger when the right people are part of it. Olivia studied their faces. And you think I'm one of those people? Emily squeezed her hand. We know you are. The rain outside had grown heavier. The cafe lights reflected softly on the wet streets. Olivia's mind raced. She had built a quiet life in Seattle. A steady job, a small apartment, a simple routine. It was safe, predictable, and sometimes lonely. Her last relationship had ended months earlier. Since then, life had felt like something she was just moving through. Now Daniel and Emily were sitting in front of her, offering something completely unexpected, something uncertain. What exactly are you asking me? Olivia said carefully. Emily took a deep breath. Come with us. Olivia laughed in disbelief. You're serious? Daniel nodded. Completely. For how long? Emily shrugged. As long as it feels right. Olivia shook her head slowly. You're asking me to leave my job, my apartment, my whole life. Not forever. Emily said gently. Just for a while. Daniel added, just long enough to see where the road goes. Olivia leaned back in her chair. You two always were a little crazy. Daniel grinned. You loved that about us. Olivia thought about that. Maybe she had. The truth was, life had felt too quiet lately, too predictable. But this idea felt wild, dangerous, exciting. You really want me there? She asked softly. Daniel answered without hesitation. Yes. Emily nodded. More than you know. Silence settled over the table. Olivia looked out the window at the rain falling over the glowing city streets. Something inside her heart stirred a feeling she had not felt in a long time. Hope, adventure, possibility. Finally, she turned back to them. If I say yes, what happens next? Daniel leaned back with a small smile. Tomorrow morning. We start driving north. Olivia blinked. North, where? Emily's eyes sparkled with excitement. Vancouver. Olivia laughed softly. You two really planned this. Daniel shrugged. Just a little. Olivia stood slowly and put on her coat. I need to think. Emily nodded with understanding. Of course. Olivia walked toward the cafe door. Daniel and Emily watched quietly, unsure what would happen next. Just before leaving, Olivia stopped. She turned around and looked at them again. You two always had a way of pulling me into trouble. Daniel smiled. Is that a yes? Olivia opened the door. Cool rain-scented air drifted inside. You'll find out in the morning. The bell chimed as she stepped into the rainy night. Daniel and Emily remained at the table staring at the empty doorway. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Finally, Emily whispered, Do you think she'll come? Daniel looked out at the rain and smiled slightly. I hope so, 'cause deep down he knew something important had just begun. And by morning, their lives might be completely different. The alarm rang at 5 in the morning, but Daniel was already awake. He lay on the narrow motel bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the heater and the distant sound of cars passing on the wet street outside. The sky beyond. The thin curtains was still dark, but a pale blue light was beginning to appear along the horizon. Today was the day. Or maybe nothing would happen at all. He turned his head and saw Emily sitting on the edge of the bed with a cup of coffee in her hands. Her hair was tied back loosely, and she looked like she had been awake for a long time. You didn't sleep either, Daniel said. Emily gave a small smile. Not much. Daniel sat up slowly and rubbed his face. What time is it? 5:20, he sighed. We said we'd leave around 6. Emily nodded, then looked toward the window. If she comes. Daniel stood and walked over to the curtain. He pulled it back slightly and looked out at the motel parking lot. Their old camper van sat there under the dim streetlight, packed with everything they owned. Bags, blankets, maps, and small boxes filled the back. The road had been their home for months now, but this morning felt different. Maybe we asked too much, Daniel said quietly. Emily shook her head. We didn't ask. We invited. It's basically the same thing. Emily took a sip of coffee and stared at the floor. Olivia's not the kind of person who says yes to something she doesn't want. Daniel nodded. That was true. Olivia had always been strong, honest, sometimes stubborn, but she also had a restless heart. That was one reason the three of them had connected so easily years ago. None of them liked staying in one place for too long. It dreamed about seeing the world together. Back then, it was only a dream. Now, it could actually happen, but only if Olivia showed up. Daniel checked the time again. 5:35. The sky outside was slowly turning gray. I should start loading the last bags, he said. Emily stood and walked to the window again. Everything is already packed. Daniel laughed softly. Right. Neither of them knew what else to say. 10 minutes passed. Daniel paced around the room. Emily sat on the bed again, holding the empty coffee cup between her hands. 5:50, then 6. Daniel stopped pacing. I guess we should go. Emily looked toward the door, but didn't move. Daniel grabbed the keys and opened the motel door. Cool morning air rushed in. The parking lot was quiet, except for the distant sound of a truck driving by on the highway. Daniel stepped outside and walked toward the van. Emily followed slowly. They reached the van just as the sun began to rise over the buildings across the street. Soft golden light touched the wet pavement. Emily crossed her arms. Maybe she changed her mind. Daniel nodded slowly. Maybe. He opened the back of the van and checked the bags again, though he already knew everything was ready. Emily leaned against the side of the van and watched. the empty street. Another minute passed. Then another. Just as Daniel was about to close the back door, a taxi turned into the motel parking lot. Both of them froze. The taxi rolled slowly toward them and stopped a few spaces away. The door opened. Olivia stepped out. She wore a denim jacket and carried a single suitcase. Hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and she looked both nervous and excited. Daniel blinked. Emily let out a breath she had been holding for 10 minutes. Olivia paid the driver, then picked up her suitcase and walked toward them. "Well," she said when she reached them, "this feels like a crazy decision already." Emily laughed and rushed forward, hugging her tightly. "You came." Olivia hugged her back. "I almost didn't." Daniel grabbed the suitcase from her and placed it in the van. "Almost doesn't count," he said with a grin. Olivia looked at the van. "So this is the famous traveling home." Daniel nodded proudly. "It's not fancy, but it gets us places." Emily opened the side door. "Come see." Olivia climbed inside and looked around. The van was small but cozy. Mattress covered the back area with blankets neatly folded. Small shelf held books, a camera, and a portable speaker. Maps were taped to one wall with colorful pins marking places they had visited. "It's actually nice," Olivia said. Daniel climbed into the driver's seat. "Wait until you see the view when we're driving through the mountains." Emily sat beside him in the passenger seat. Olivia settled into the back, stretching her legs. "All right," she said. "Let's do this." Daniel started the engine. The van rumbled to life. Slowly they pulled out of the motel parking lot and onto the quiet morning road. Seattle was still waking up. Coffee shops were opening, and a few people walked along the sidewalks with jackets pulled tight against the cool air. No one spoke for the first few minutes. The moment felt too big. Finally, Daniel glanced at the mirror and smiled. "You're really here." Olivia nodded. "I know." Emily turned around in her seat. "You don't regret it already, do you?" Olivia laughed softly. "Ask me again in a few days." The highway leading north was almost empty. The city slowly faded behind them as tall trees and green hills replaced buildings. The morning sun broke through the clouds, lighting the wet road ahead. Emily turned on the radio and soft music filled the van. Olivia watched the passing scenery through the window. For the first time in months, she felt like something new had begun. "You know," she said, "my boss is going to be very confused when I don't show up today." Daniel laughed. "Did you quit?" Olivia shook her head. "I left a note." Emily raised an eyebrow. "That sounds mysterious." Olivia smiled. "I told them I needed time to figure out my life." Daniel nodded approvingly. "That's a good reason." Miles passed beneath them as they drove through forests and small towns. The air smelled fresh through the open window. Eventually, Olivia leaned forward between the seats. "Can I ask?" "Something." Daniel nodded. "Of course." She hesitated for a moment. "You two were always close, even back then in Chicago." Emily and Daniel exchanged a quick glance. "That's true," Emily said. Olivia continued carefully. "But sometimes it felt like there was something more between the three of us." The van grew quiet. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "You felt that too?" he asked. Olivia nodded slowly. "Yeah." Emily turned slightly in her seat. "We talked about that on the road." Olivia looked surprised. "You did?" Daniel nodded many times. Emily spoke softly. "You realized something." "What?" Olivia asked. "That maybe the connection we had back then wasn't just friendship." Olivia's heart beat faster. She had wondered about that for years, but never dared to say it. Daniel continued. "But we also knew it had to be honest. No pressure, no expectations." Emily nodded. "We just wanted the chance to explore what it could mean." The road curved through thick forests as they drove closer to the Canadian border. Olivia looked out the window for a long moment. "So you're saying all three of us?" Daniel answered calmly. "Only if it feels right." for everyone. Emily added gently, and if it doesn't, that's okay too. We just didn't want to keep wondering forever. Olivia felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear. This was not a simple idea, but it also felt honest, real. She thought about the last few years of her life. The routine job, the quiet apartment, the relationship that had slowly fallen apart. Everything had felt safe, but also empty. Now she was sitting in a van with two people who had once made her feel completely alive. The highway sign ahead appeared through the trees. Canada border -5 miles. Daniel slowed the van slightly. Emily looked back at Olivia. Still with us? Olivia smiled. Yeah, Daniel laughed softly. Good. They reached the border crossing just as the sun rose higher into the sky. After a few questions and quick checks, the officer waved them through. The van rolled forward. A large sign appeared on the side of the road. Welcome to Canada, Emily clapped her hands happily. We did it. Daniel grinned. First stop, Vancouver. Olivia leaned back against the seat, watching the mountains appear in the distance. Something inside her chest felt lighter. Didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She leaned forward again between the seats. All right, she said. Daniel glanced in the mirror. All right, what? Olivia smiled. Let's see where this road goes. Daniel pressed the accelerator gently, and the van continued north toward the mountains. None of them realized yet that the journey ahead would change their lives in ways they could never predict. But in that moment, with the road stretching endlessly ahead and the morning sun shining through the windshield, all three of them felt the same quiet truth. Sometimes the best stories begin with a simple decision to say yes.